Hello, dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. Friends, today we will discuss about ancient communication and technology. Friends, we eat, we recreate, and we procreate. We breathe, we outbreathe. Communication is like that only. Communication is also very necessary part of our life. Communication word came into existence by the Latin word communicare, which means to share. When we share our feelings, ideas, views, opinions, what do? We communicate. History of communication has traversed a very long path. Since the advent of mankind, history of communication has been going through a tremendous change. Friends, earlier in olden times, the way to communicate was to carve on pillars, to carve some symbols on pillars. But that mode of communication was a static one. It was not a dynamic one, because we cannot take a pillar from here one place to another. One needed the readers to come and travel a long path before reaching the place where the pillar is standing. So the next form was communication was to go for some efficient means of communication, and for that writing was considered to be the most appropriate and efficient means of communication. Then we see that in times of danger or also in times of victory, smokes were a kind of symbol that used to communicate the other people. For example, if there is some danger that it is imminent, one is left on an island and doesn't know how to get a boat or how to cross the sea. What they used to fire some woods, and smoke used to come out. That gave a sense of communication that, look, that person is in danger, we should go and rescue him or her. The same way victory. In times of victory, when we used to celebrate victory, we used to fire and used to go around the fire and celebrate. But still, that communication had its limitations. It was found that some non-verbal means of communication were also very effective. For example, the whistled language of Gomeras in the Canary Islands. When the deep valley, one used to call their friends or inmates through whistle blowing. But again, its periphery was very limited. It couldn't cross the periphery and reach a longer distance. Therefore, writing is the most indispensable part of communication. And we have seen the politics and the economy all depend on the various modes of communication and also the shift of power. Now, we will proceed through other sections of this module. Origin of speech. Human communication was revolutionized with the origin of speech approximately 50,000 years ago. Symbols were developed about 30,000 years ago. The imperfection of speech, which nonetheless allowed easier dissemination of ideas and stimulated inventions, eventually resulted in the creation of new forms of communications, improving both the range at which people could communicate and the longevity of the information. All of those inventions were based on the key concept of the symbol. The oldest known symbols created for the purpose of communication were cave paintings, a form of rock art dating to the Upper Paleolithic age. The oldest known cave painting is located within Chauvet Cave, dated to around 30,000 BCE. These paintings contain increasing amount of information. People may have created the first calendar as far back as 15,000 years ago. The connection between drawing and writing is further shown by linguistics. In ancient Egypt and ancient Greece, the concepts and words of drawing and writing were one and the same. The next advancement in the history of communications came with the production of petroglyphs, carving onto a rock surface. It took about 20,000 years ago for Homo sapiens to move from the first cave paintings to the first petroglyphs, which are dated to around 10,000 BC. Meaning behind symbols. It is possible that humans of that time used some other forms of communication, often for mnemonic purposes, especially arranged stones, symbols carved in wood or earth, quipu like ropes, tattoos, but little other than the most durable carved stones have survived to modern times, and we can only speculate about their existence based on our observation of still existing hunter-gatherer cultures such as those of Africa or Oceania. A pictograph is a symbol representing a concept, object, activity, place, or event by illustration. Pictography is a form of proto-writing whereby ideas are transmitted through drawing. Pictographs were the next step in the evolution of communication. The most important difference between petroglyphs and pictograms is that petroglyphs are simply showing an event, but pictograms are telling a story about the event, and thus they can, for example, be ordered chronologically. Ideas and ideograms. Pictograms in turn evolved into ideograms, graphical symbols that represent an idea. Their ancestors, the pictograms, could represent only something resembling their form. Therefore, a pictogram of a circle could represent a sun, but not concepts like heat, light, day, or great god of the sun. Ideograms, on the other hand, could convey more abstract concepts so that, for example, an ideogram of two sticks can mean not only legs but also a verb to walk. Because some ideas are universal, many different cultures developed similar ideograms. For example, an eye with tear means sadness in Native American ideograms in California, as it does for the Aztecs, the early Chinese, and the Egyptians. Ideograms were precursors of logographic writing systems such as Egyptian hieroglyphs and Chinese character. Examples of the ideographical proto-writing systems thought not to contain language-specific information include the Vinca script and the early Indus script. In both cases, there are claims of decipherment of linguistic content without wide acceptance. Beginning of the alphabet. The first pure alphabets emerged around 2000 BC in ancient Egypt, but by then alphabetic principles had already been incorporated into Egyptian hieroglyphs for a millennium. By 2700 BC, Egyptian writing had set some 22 hieroglyphs to represent syllables that begin with a single consonant of their language, plus a vowel or no vowel to be supplied by the native speaker. These glyphs were used as pronunciation guides for logograms to write grammatical inflections and later to transcribe loan words and foreign names. However, although seemingly alphabetic in nature, the original Egyptian uniliterals were not a system and were never used by themselves to encode Egyptian speech. In the Middle Bronze Age, and apparently alphabetic system is thought by some to have been developed in Central Egypt around 1700 BC for or by Semitic workers, but we cannot read these early writings and their exact nature remains open to interpretation. Over the next 5 centuries, this Semitic alphabet seems to have spread around north. All subsequent alphabets around the world, with the sole exception of Korean Hangul, have either descended from it or been inspired by one of its descendants. Writing numbers for the purpose of record keeping began long before the writing of language. Independent writing systems also arose in China around 1200 BC, but historians debate whether these writing systems were developed completely independently of Sumerian writing or whether either or both were inspired by Sumerian writing via a process of cultural diffusion. That is, it is possible that the concept of representing language used writing, though not necessarily the specifics of how such a system worked, were passed on by traders or merchants traveling between two regions. However, Chinese characters are considered by many to be an independent invention because there is no evidence of contact between ancient China and the literate civilizations of the Near East, and because of the distinct differences between the Mesopotamian and Chinese approaches to logography and phonetic representation. Egyptian script is dissimilar from Mesopotamian cuneiform, but similarities in concepts and in earliest attestations suggest that the idea of writing may have come to Egypt from Mesopotamia. In 1999, Archaeology magazine reported that the earliest Egyptian glyphs date back to 3400 BC, which challenged the commonly held belief that early pictographic symbols representing a specific place, object, or quantity first evolved into more complex phonetic symbols in Mesopotamia. Indus Valley script. Debate surrounds the Indus script of the Bronze Age Indus Valley civilization in ancient India. In addition, the script is still undeciphered and there is debate over whether the script is true writing at all or instead some kind of proto-writing or non-linguistic sign system. Various other known cases of cultural diffusion of writing texts where the general concept of writing was transmitted from one culture to another but the specifics of the system were independently developed. Recent examples are the Cherokee syllabic invented by Sekeliu and the Pavaha Hmong system for writing the Hmong language. Advent of written communication. The oldest forms of writing were primarily logographic in nature based on pictographic and ideographic elements. The earliest known form of writing is called futar. Most writing systems can be broadly divided into three categories: logographic, syllabic, and alphabetic. However, all there may be found in any given writing system in varying proportions, often making it difficult to categorize a system uniquely. The invention of the first writing systems is roughly contemporary with the beginning of the Bronze Age in the late Neolithic of the late 4000 BC. The first writing system is generally believed to have been invented in prehistoric Sumer and developed by the late 3000 BC into cuneiform. Egyptian hieroglyphs and the undeciphered Proto-Elamite writing system and Indus Valley script also date to this era, though a few scholars have questioned the Indus Valley script status as a writing system. The original Sumerian writing system was derived from a system of clay tokens used to represent commodities. By the end of the 4th millennium BC, this has evolved into a method of keeping accounts using a round-shaped stylus impressed into soft clay at different angles for recording numbers. This was gradually augmented with pictographic writing using a sharp stylus to indicate what was being counted. Round stylus and sharp stylus writing was gradually replaced about 2700 to 2000 BC by writing using a wedge-shaped style, hence the term cuneiform, at first only for logograms but developed to include phonetics elements by the 2800 BC. About 2600 BC, cuneiform began to represent syllables of spoken Sumerian language. The Chinese script may have originated independently of Middle Eastern scripts around the 16th century BC out of late Neolithic Chinese system of pro-writing dating back to 6000 BCE. The pre-Columbian writing system of Americans included Olmec and Mayan are also generally believed to have had independent origins. It was in the 6th century BCE that the sending of written messages became a standard feature of government in early civilizations. Much of our knowledge of those times derived from archives of such messages discovered by archaeologists. Early postal communication. This is a great advantage to a ruler who can send or receive a message quicker than his rivals. In the estimation of the ancient world, the most efficient postal system is that of the Persians, but in place by Cyrus in about 540 BC to control his new empire, the largest yet known. It is much improved upon by Darius a generation later. Imperial communication 522 486 BC. Darius extends the network of roads across the Persian Empire to enable both troops and information to move into startling speed. At the center of the system into the royal road from Susa to Sardis, a distance of some 2000 miles. At intervals of a day's ride, there are posting stations where new men and fresh horses will be available at any moment to carry a document on through the next day's journey. The Greek historian Herodotus marvels at these Persian couriers. By this method, a message can travel the full distance of the road in 10 days at a speed of about 200 miles a day. A similar road goes down through Syria to Mediterranean coast in Egypt. Another goes east to India. Many different tongues were spoken in the Persian Empire from Egypt to India, but all the official messages traveling on the imperial roads were in one language, Aramaic. This Semitic tongue, deriving from the tribe in northern Syria, first spread through Assyria, then Babylonian merchants carried further afield until by the 6th century it was in general use as a lingua franca throughout Mesopotamia. As a language for the Persian civil service, Aramaic also had a practical advantage. It used the Phoenician alphabet, a language to which it was related, so its letters could be written on papyrus instead of needing to be pressed with a cuneiform stylus into wet clay. Communication speeds up. Until recent centuries, the only way to increase the speed of communication has been to improve the speed of the messenger. This depends on good roads, fast riders, and well-provisioned staging posts at which fresh men and horses are always available. The networks of Roman roads makes communication steady and reliable, but it is unlikely that it is faster than the delivery system perfected by the Persians on the terrain of Steppe and Plateau, across which horsemen can gallop with fine abandon. However, one major improvement in the speed of communication is recorded in the Middle East, where in certain circumstances of simpler messages substituted for the horse and the rider. domesticated pigeons are first developed in ancient Egypt, and the pigeon loft or dovecote subsequently became a living larder for many communities such as medieval monasteries. In Baghdad, the 11th century, the idea first occurs of making use of the tendency of certain pigeons to fly straight home from wherever they may be. A rapid one-way postal service always back to base becomes possible. By selective breeding of suitable birds, the homing pigeon is developed, the swiftest and most wide-ranging conqueror of medieval history. Genghis Khan saw the obvious potential. Pigeons carried swift news of each conquest to his homeland in Mongolia, but the rapid and widespread dissemination of message must await the development of printing. Now, let's sum up. Friends, as we have seen that communication is the basic need of human being, and people about 550,000 years ago realized the importance of communication. We have seen that the oldest form of communication is to carve painting on rock in caves. Later, with the advancement of communication, petroglyphs came into existence, which is carving on rock surface. And then the next advancement was pictograms. The basic difference between petroglyphs and pictograms was that while petroglyphs showed an event to us, pictograms told the story of the whole event. We have seen that around 2000 BC, Egyptians were able to develop the first alphabets of communication. But to make communication speedier, faster, and relevant, Persians came with the innovative idea of using pigeons to send their messages. The credit goes to the Persians. And after that, using pigeons as the symbol of sending messages, the emperors and kings concentrated and focused on making roads. So, better roads became the carrier of communication from one place to another in a very, very short period of time. Thank you.